All right. Can everyone hear me online all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. We can hear y'all loud and clear. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Real quick for everyone joining online, if you could please type your name into the chat, as well as if you're on here representing another agency, if you could include that as well. If you're just joining as a resident, please include that too. And if you are here in person, we're handing around the sign-in sheet. But if you don't get a hold of it, if you could just sign it on your way out, that would be great. So for those of you who are new to these meetings, our purpose is to enhance the county's preparedness and response to emergencies by involving all levels of the community. So involving nonprofits, local businesses, government, and residents as well. We are so very glad that y'all are here. Let's see. I do want to cover some ground rules real quick. So if you're joining online, and you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function. And my colleague Megan here will let us know that you have a question, and then you can come off mute to ask. And if you're in person, simply raise your hand. You can ask the question, and Chief Hardesty will either reword your question for everyone online, or we also have a microphone to hand out. And also, I'd like to let everyone know that we are going to record this meeting and it'll be available later, pending that that's all right. Chief Hardesty, okay. All right. So real quick, our agenda. Oh, I was muting. There we go. So our agenda today, I'm going to give y'all a couple of OEM or Office of Emergency Management updates. Then I'll introduce Chief Hardesty, our speaker for today. He'll do our spill report, our hazardous materials spill report, and then he'll get into his presentation about understanding the hazardous materials risk here in Howard County. Then we'll have time for any questions that you might have, and then we'll adjourn. So for our Office of Emergency Management updates, we are expecting some more snowfall tomorrow. Particularly might see some snowfall during the commute tomorrow morning. So we're urging everyone to really be careful if you have to get out and drive. Make sure you clean off your vehicle completely to get all the snow off your roof, off of all your windows. And also, like if you're going to use a generator, if your power goes out, please make sure your generator is outside and away from your windows. I brought some winter preparedness goodies with me today. We've got some windshield scrapers and some emergency blankets, so feel free to take some on your way out. Also, if you would like our office to come to your organization and do a presentation on emergency preparedness, I do presentations on kind of how to be prepared in general for the unexpected, from natural disasters to smaller emergencies. And we have a link on our website, or you can just email me or catch me after the meeting and I can get that set up for y'all. Or you could also, if you want to hear about all of our other meetings for LAPC or other OEM events, you can join our email list. You can scan this QR code or go to the website, and it's really easy to set up. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Battalion Chief Stephen Hardesty. Chief Hardesty has served the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Services for over 33 years and is currently assigned to the Special Operations Division. He serves as the team leader and program manager for the 130-member team that handles all hazardous materials and technical rescue incidents. Chief Hardesty is also a rescue specialist, safety officer, and task force leader with FEMA's Urban Search and Rescue Task Force 1. During his career in the Fire and Rescue Service, he has responded to many local, state, and regional disasters, such as the tornadoes that devastated the towns of, sorry if I am not pronouncing this correctly, La Plata, and College Park in Maryland, and national level responses to Hurricanes Isabel, Katrina, and Superstorm Sandy, and most recently the wildfire response in Maui. Chief Hardesty is a National Pro Board certified fire officer 4 and a level 2 fire and rescue instructor. He has instructed advanced and technician level hazmat and rescue training all over the country for the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute. In addition to his service to the citizens of Howard County, Chief Hardesty is an active member of the Arbutus Volunteer Fire Department in Baltimore County. All right. Thank you for coming today, Chief Hardesty. Let me see if I can get this clicker back. There it goes. Okay, yeah, you just have to hit. There you go.
So I'm going to do the spill report real quick before we get started. Is it this one that's reporting for the?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the spill report. During this last period, we responded to 9 incidents involving chemicals or fuel spills. 5 involved releases of diesel fuel from large trucks involved in accidents. During those incidents, 175 gallons of diesel fuel leaked into the environment. We were proudly able to prevent 400 additional gallons from entering the environment after we arrived on the scene. It is important to also note that one of those incidents did involve an overturned truck hauling milk, where we actually had to help mitigate the milk spill and get rid of the 3,000 gallons of milk that were there also. So we responded to a report of an ammonia leak. Our investigation revealed that there were no leaks, and it was actually an alarm issue. It was in the middle of one of the thunderstorms, and it was a lightning strike. So we assisted a Dayton resident with a mercury spill from a broken blood pressure cuff. And then we handled 2 incidents involving lithium-ion batteries. So it's another one of our things that's on the upcoming and happening quite frequently now, also in the county. So I'm happy to spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon to talk a little bit about the hazardous materials risk here in Howard County. And I'm happy to report that this picture was taken from Lake Timacundi right in downtown Columbia by one of our retired firefighters or captains from the fire department. So bump into that. So anyway, all right. So we're going to go through today, recognize the dangers posed by hazardous materials, identify some places here in the county where hazardous materials are likely to be encountered, and identify procedures to minimize personal and community exposure to hazardous materials. So talk a little bit about some of the dangers posed by hazardous materials. What's the hazardous materials? What's the concern? What are hazardous materials? How those materials affect us when we get exposed to those. And then we'll talk about what happens when hazardous materials get spilled through the environment out in the community. So, and throughout that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done to prepare everybody in the fire department, not just special operations. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those things that we've done along the way to make it easier. So why are hazardous materials a concern? Sometimes the challenge posed by hazardous materials glares at us in the headlines, and sometimes it's just a back page story. So one of the big ones, in Bhopal, India, 44 tons of methyl isocyanate gas spewed into the atmosphere, killing at least 1,700 persons and injuring tens of thousands of others. When this incident happened, Congress in the United States reached out to a bunch of HazMat teams across the country and said, is it possible for something like this to happen in our country? And if it did, what would happen? And the response to that was, yes, it is possible to have something like that happen in this country. And don't know that it would be exactly as bad as it was, but it wouldn't be too terribly different. And Congress was like, we have to fix this. And that was the beginning, or the birth, if you will, of a lot of the federal regulations that deal with storing, transportation, and manufacturing of hazardous materials. So In a small Kentucky community, tank cars containing toxic substances derailed and burned. The fire caused a column of toxic smoke 3,000 feet high that forced 7,500 area residents to evacuate. In Florida, vandals broke the valves of a chemical tank at a local swimming pool supply company. The chemicals mixed to form toxic acid and poisonous cloud of vapors that sent 45 people to the hospital. So some of these things are accidents and some of them are potential or intentional, I should say. In Louisiana, up to 41,000 pounds of hydroboric acid fouled part of the Mississippi River after two ships collided. Thankfully, here in Howard County, it's been quite a few years since any ships migrated up the Patapsco River, so we're pretty fortunate with that. So don't have that problem here. A tractor trailer carrying 8 Navy missiles struck a bridge, flipped over, and rolled down an embankment of Interstate 70 in Frederick County. That was an incident where someone here in the fire department said, "Phew, glad those nuclear warheads weren't involved in an accident here in Howard County." And when I looked at him and said, "You're right," because 15 minutes before that accident happened, they were driving through Howard County. And he went, his face was like, "Oh my God." So two New Jersey workers were killed and 5 injured in Vaberson Hell as they cleaned a chemical mixing vat at a local company. That just happened 4 months ago. Baltimore courthouse evacuated after white powder in an envelope sickens office workers. Just happened right before Christmas. So it's out there. It happens quite often. Like I said, some of these things you hear about, some of them you don't. Anybody hear about the gas explosion that happened yesterday in Washington, D.C.? Child care center. Luckily, everybody had been evacuated, odor of gas, and while the fire department was there investigating, the building blew up. Yeah, we run those quite often here in the county. People get upset at us because they stand in the middle of the street jumping up and down. But when we respond to a gas leak in a situation like that, we don't pull up and park right out front like as if there was someone calling for smoke in a building. We park a few blocks away. Somebody will walk down, make contact. We'll bring our gas monitors and go to work from there. Twice in my career, I've been involved in incidents where buildings have blown up, and don't ever want to live through that again. I was up here on Stanford Boulevard the morning that building blew up. So water hazardous materials, that's it. That's one of those things, depending on what federal agency regulates the material that we're talking about. We call it all different things, but it basically is the same stuff. So because of their chemical or physical, biological nature, hazardous materials may be biohazards, poisonous, corrosive, explosives, flammable, or radioactive. They also would be oxidizers, asphyxiants, or a substance capable of causing severe allergic reactions. Such substances can vary greatly in their ability to cause harm and can be classified in a couple of different ways. The Department of Transportation says hazardous materials are any substance or material in any form or a quantity that pose an unreasonable risk to safety, health, and property when transported in commerce. The EPA says hazardous materials are chemicals released into the environment that could be potentially harmful to the public's health and welfare. OSHA says hazardous materials are chemicals that would be a risk to employees if exposed in the workplace. And our working definition basically that we use is any substance that could hurt or harm living organisms or the environment when it escapes into containment system, from its containment system. We had talked about this once before. I was delivering one of my reports and somebody put their hand up and said, why do you guys worry about milk trucks that spill and you have milk that gets into the storm drain? And then, well, because milk is really, really toxic to anything that breathes. So any kind of living fish, algae, grasses that grow that help filter anything that goes into that stormwater management pond will get killed off from the milk. And people go, how bad could it be we drink it? And it's like, it's not that it's toxic. It's just that it creates the inability to transmit oxygen through the water that normally happens with plants and stuff like that. So yeah, so it's one of those things that, is a 5-gallon bucket filled with water a hazardous material? I'm asking anybody in the room. Okay, depends on what it's reacting with. I can tell you, according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, it is. The next time you buy a 5-gallon bucket at Home Depot, look at the label on top of the thing and what does it have in it? Anybody remember what's stamped on top of a lid from a 5-gallon bucket? It has a little baby climbing in top of it with the little "don't let this happen" thing. Why? Why do you think that happens? Because poor kid fell in it head first and drowned in a bucket of water. Yeah. So routes of entry for hazardous materials. We can inhale it. That's one of the most common. Ingestion. Sometimes we get it on our hands, or we touch something and we forget to wash our hands, and then we eat, and then before you know it, you're ingesting it. Things can get onto our skin and absorb through our skin and react with us or harm us that way, or injection. Most people think of injection as like a needle, but we've had situations where folks have been, working in industry and get cut. And because the cut, the laceration that happens with the jagged piece of metal is covered with whatever the chemical was that was in the vat that broke. And next thing you know, it's getting injected straight into the body, into the cells of the body. So this is one of those hierarchy of controls that in industry and in the workplace, when people are going to be known to be exposed to chemicals in the workplace, there's a bunch of different things that the federal government says that you have to do to limit that exposure to protect those folks. Physically remove the hazard, or use different chemicals, or use different mixtures that have less lethality to them, if you will, to the workers that are being involved with them. And it goes all the way down to substitution, engineering controls. You see on the movies where they're working in a laboratory and they're doing stuff under a hood, so that air gets sucked through the hood and it goes through a cleaning system before it goes out. That's an example of an engineering control. Administrative controls change the way that people work. How many hours a day you can work and be exposed to those chemicals. And then the last thing that OSHA says that we're supposed to provide to you as an employee that's going to be exposed to chemicals is PPE. So from the fire department response, our HazMat team, we flip this upside down because we go to that right away. When you don't know what you're dealing with, you have a potential for an exposure, someone else is already sick from it, we go right to PPE. So a little different, and we do that to help protect us. So how HazMat moves through the environment, it really depends on, what the mixture is, what the compound is, or what state is in. Is it a solid, a liquid, or a gas? Obviously, if you take a 5-gallon bucket of water and you spill it on the pavement, how far is it going to go? If I did the same thing with a 5-gallon bucket of paint or a 5-gallon bucket of molasses, because the viscosity of each of those liquids is a little bit different, it's going to move a little bit slower or a little bit faster through the environment. So sometimes you can have a pinpoint source where we know where it's coming from, and it's really easy to figure it out. A factory smokestack, if you will, and the flow of toxic waste from a pipe or a drain to a storm at a point source. Liquid runoff from a field in which pesticides were used is another instance, if you will, of how stuff moves through the environment. We just went through a couple weeks ago a lot of storm issues with a lot of water and runoff. Anytime that we go out and do a water rescue incident during a storm or a flood like that, we put all of our water rescue folks in dry suits. We don't swim in wet, like scuba suits, if you will. And that's designed to keep that water off of our guys who are swimming in the water or wading out in the water to get somebody out of a car, because all that water that's running across the road and running across fields, and everybody has nice green lawns. Well, those green lawns come at a cost. It's pesticides and herbicides and all that. So containments behave differently in the environment depending on their physical state. The substance moves in a pathway determined by its own characteristics, back to the water, dumping paint. Um, the material may change chemically or break down into elements or compounds, depending on what the product is. Sometimes propane is shipped in a liquid format, but when we open the valve up and let the propane start to off gas, it changes to a gas, and that's what we burn. So when stuff enters into the environment, depending on what it is, you may have a reaction, and that goes, so sometimes they're heavier, sometimes they're lighter than air. Some things float away. I tell people all the time, propane, you have a propane leak in your house, we're going to find that down low because propane is heavier than air. Natural gas is kind of buoyant or a little lighter than air, and it's going to rise up. So a lot of times we'll go and somebody will say, I smell natural gas in my basement. And we go downstairs and we stick our meters up here, and people are going, what are you doing that for? And we're like, well, because there could be 2 feet of natural gas filling up your basement, and you don't know it unless we stick that air monitor up there. So let's talk a little bit about places in Howard County where we can find hazardous materials. We'll talk a little bit about clues. Yep, we're the fire department. We're not the police department, but there are a lot of easy clues out there that let us to know where they are in our community. And when you start driving home today, slow down and take a look at what's around you. You'll look at things a little bit differently and know that stuff is there. So I don't want to harm anybody. I'm not the sky is falling guy. We have some chemicals in the county. We have some pretty nasty stuff, but we have a lot of really good controls that have say knock on wood, that have made us pretty fortunate. So one of the things that I wanted to draw to everybody's attention, through our friends at Emergency Management, we have in place several different plans that we, as the fire department, the police department, all the county government agencies, when disasters happen, who plays what part and who does what, and who's responsible for this and who's responsible for that. And all of that information is available online through OEM. So the some of the things that are established by law, the CERT plan, or the Comprehensive Emergency Response and Recovery Plan, the Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment, that makes us look as a county government. What are these things that are man-made or human-made or that could happen in the county, and how do we respond to those? And then the Community Hazard Handbook. And that takes into, fixed facility sites and hazardous materials or transportation routes throughout the county, and how well traveled they are and what type of material is going up and down the road all the time. In the previous picture, there was pictures of here. That's a picture that was taken at the Port of Baltimore. Everything that comes into the Port of Baltimore goes one of 3 different ways, or really 4. Okay, it comes out of Baltimore and goes up 95 or down 95. And if it goes down 95, it's going through Howard County. Okay, if it goes west, it's either going to go out Interstate 80 or 83 or out Interstate 70. If it goes out Interstate 70, guess what? It's coming through Howard County. So a lot of stuff moves through the Port of Baltimore every day, and it either leaves there on a train or it leaves there on a truck like this. And depending on which path it's taken, it could be moving through Howard County. So clues that indicate the presence of a hazardous material. Detecting the presence of hazardous materials can help you make decisions and take corrective actions. In Roseburg, Oregon, a number of years ago, several people observed a truck with an explosives placard parked at a lumber yard. Later that night, a fire broke out in a dumpster at the lumber yard and ignited the explosives in the truck. 18 city blocks were destroyed, 13 people were killed, and 125 others were injured. Had somebody recognized, or the people who recognized, why is there a truck with explosives in it parked at the lumber yard? And back then when this happened, there were no regulations that said it has to be secured and so on and so forth. But there were a bunch of people who, after this happened, said, that truck's been parked there for 4 days. We've been driving past it wondering, I wonder why we didn't say anything. And now that half the town got leveled, people are like, ah. So things have tightened up a little bit. I'm pretty sure today that if something like that were to happen, and I know it does because we've had calls where somebody will call and say, hey, there's like the tank part of a truck parked on Mendenhall Court in Columbia, and none of the businesses around here are owning up to owning it, and it's placarded. Can you guys come out and take a look at this thing? And we go out and look at it, and there's no tags on it, so the police can't run a tag on it. Well, all of these little placards that are on trucks, you can unclip them and flip them and change them. So depending on what you're hauling in your truck, you can flip the placard. And there are federal regulations that if it's over a certain amount of pounds, it's got to be placard. The most scariest placard on all of them are the ones that say, please drive safely or have a nice day. That means that truck is hauling, it's probably hauling chemicals, but it's not hauling enough of them that they have to have the placard on them. So they're the most scariest one for us. But back to Mendenhall Court, we looked and it was an empty tanker. They were getting ready to shut the water off at one of the businesses overnight. And the company that was coming in to do the work dropped the tanker off and they were going to fill it up with water. Well, somebody decided to flip open and put one of these flip open the HazMat placard on it because they figured the kids would leave it alone and nobody would mess with it if it had a HazMat placard on it. Instead, somebody called me at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, can you guys come out and take a look at this thing and tell us what it is? So I'm pretty sure that most folks around in our county would ask a question and point out we wouldn't have that organ incident, if you will. Some other clues that indicate the presence of hazardous materials. They're common throughout the community. They're used in industry, business, government, agriculture. Private citizens like us use them every day. Some examples of hazardous products in your home and in your community. Some products in your home are considered hazardous and require proper disposal. Look through your home for hazardous chemicals and products. Use the following list as a guide when it comes time to dispose of those. I'll start off by saying the county landfill does do household hazardous waste. I think they have one weekend a month where they could say, bring it in, no questions asked, we'll take it and we'll get rid of it. Now they ask you, what's in it and that kind of stuff, so they know where to store that and that kind of stuff. But there is there. So things that you could find in the garage or workshop: antifreeze, automotive batteries, body fillers, body putty, brake fluid, diesel fuel, engine cleaners, engine degreasers, flares, both the ones you keep in your car in your emergency kit or ones that you have from the boat, fluorescent light bulbs, gasoline, oil filters. We look at hobby or miscellaneous supplies, ammunition, batteries, lithium ion, and NiCad. We talked a little bit about lithium ion. That's the new craze that's going on. The biggest things with lithium ion batteries, pay attention to the charging instructions. If you buy a scooter or a mobility device, a bike with a battery in it, or a rechargeable battery, if you buy anything with a rechargeable battery in it that says do not leave unattended while charging, I would tell you to unplug it and throw it away. Because what that is telling you is there is a chance that if you leave it plugged in too long, that it's going to overheat and those batteries are going to catch on fire. And the reason why they tell you not to leave it unattended is because if you're there and you see the battery smoking, you can unplug it and move it out of your house. Most reputable manufacturers have built in battery maintenance systems or systems that detect that the battery's getting full or that it's overcharging, and it'll stop the power to it. And they always say those instructions read something like, when your batteries don't hold a fully charge enough, over time, it's time to replace it, so on and so forth. But it won't say, do not charge, unsupervised or whatever, because they already know that if the battery starts to heat up, it's going to cut the power off to it. It's going to stop it from overheat. All of the second class and third class batteries that people buy to replace stuff when their batteries go bad in they're rechargeable things, are all ones that usually don't have those systems built into them that stop the power going to them. So it's another one of those things. If you go online to buy a replacement battery for your kid's scooter, and there's a $300 one and there's a $90 one, what do you think most people are going to buy? The $90 one. Yeah. What do you think you're getting with the $90 one versus the $300 one? Yeah. One that's likely going to catch on fire and one that's not. So just remember what you pay for, and you get what you pay for. So, computers have batteries in them. You know, a lot of people will go into a computer, take a computer part, take the hard drive out of it, and totally forget about the battery in it. Well, when computers go to the landfill, they crack them open and take the batteries out of them, and then they get put in a box, and the computer gets off-sourced to someplace else to go in it to pick apart all kinds of other stuff. There's a lot of precious metal and all kinds of stuff in a computer that could be harmful if it gets into the environment. So fireworks, they're always, you know, somebody dies and their family starts to clean out the house and says, hey, we found these old fireworks. Do you guys want to? We're like, ooh. So a lot of times. Flea powder, gun cleaners, lighter fluid, nail polish remover, photochemicals. We do have a occasion every now and then to run a call where somebody says, yeah, my father was an avid photographer, and he developed a lot of his own stuff at home. We had our own little black room in the basement where he would, you know, develop pictures and stuff like that. So, and then televisions. A lot of televisions have a lot of electronics in it that should be recycled. So, home maintenance, ammonia, bleach, fluorescent light bulbs, mercury switches from thermostats, mercury thermometers, mineral spirits, paint, oil-based paint thinners. I've mentioned this a couple times before. We just ran one the other day. Mercury, a lot of people say, I remember when we were kids, we played with mercury in science class and all that kind of stuff. Well, mercury is a heavy metal, and it's the nasty brother or cousin to lead. We all know about lead poisoning and lead paint and all that kind of stuff. Well, mercury, when it gets into your system, has the same effect. And the problem with mercury is it's so persistent. It's a liquid, but it's very heavy, and it evaporates just a little bit faster than rocks do. So it sticks around for a long, long, long time. And when you heat it up a little bit, you increase the amount of vapors, and breathing those vapors in can be very harmful, especially in a small area, in a house or in a residence, if you will. We've had mercury spills in the county where we can't get the levels down enough, and we've actually had, you know, residents cut up the carpet in their house and get rid of the carpet, you know, dispose of the carpet as hazardous material to be able to get the mercury levels low enough in the house that people want to go back into the house. So, you know, people say, I played with mercury when I was a kid in high school. It's no big deal. Well, remember that. So, lawn and garden stuff, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, pesticides, weed killers. Believe it or not, over the years, the federal government has been leeching onto these folks and cutting down the amount of stuff. You know, guys used to put stuff on their lawn and the grass was always green, and then before you know it, stuff doesn't work anymore. Well, it's because it's not the same mixture that they were selling years ago, because they realized that some of that stuff's pretty harmful to the environment. And in fact, we've had some citizens in the past that have realized that has happened and mixed a couple of them together. And mixing chemicals together is never a real good thing. So, outdoor maintenance, chlorine, muriatic acid, pool and spa chemicals, propane cylinders are all things that we should be considered about and think about as a hazardous material. So these are all things that you could just find in your house. It's funny because I took this home. I was reading through this presentation once, and my wife's like, what are you working on? I said, how many of these things do we have in the house? And she's like reading them and all that. She's like, oh my God, oh my God. I said, and you're worried about me running out the door going on HazMat incidents all the time, and we have all this stuff in the house. And she looked at me like I was crazy. So, did you know that most victims of chemical accidents are injured at home? Those incidents usually result from ignorance, or carelessness in using flammable or combustible materials. Anybody know what just happened in Baltimore City last weekend before the snowstorm came? Fire pit, trying to get the fire started. Fire wouldn't go to. Uncle Jim says, hold on a minute, I'll get it. He goes in the garage. What's he getting? Gasoline. Pours it in. All right, everybody stand back. Flicks it, and what happens? Woof. 8 people to the burn center. 4 kids and 4 adults, just like that. So happens quite often. More than 30 states have passed laws giving workers and citizens access to information about hazardous substance in their workplace and communities. As many as 500,000 products pose physical or health hazards and can be defined as hazardous materials. Those numbers change all the time. Each year, over 1,000 new synthetic chemicals are introduced. The Department of Transportation regulates routes, speed limits used by carriers, and monitors the types of hazardous materials crossing state lines. Commerce is a big thing that they pay attention to. The average community of 100,000 residents creates 23.5 tons of toilet bowl cleaner, 13.5 tons of liquid household cleaners, and 3.5 tons of motor oil are discharged into wastewater treatment facilities each year. That's a lot of stuff that ends up getting flushed down a toilet or rinsed down a drain that, when I first saw this, I called our friends at the water treatment plant and said, how much oil do you see coming through? And they were like, it's amazing, a lot. We still see a lot coming through. So the average household throws 15.5 pounds of hazardous materials into trash each year. Hazardous materials in various forms can cause death, serious injury, long-lasting health effects, and damage to buildings, homes, and other properties. So a lot of different chemicals out there. These products are also shipped daily on the nation's highways, railroads, waterways, and pipelines. We'll talk a little bit about each one of those modes of transportation here in a little bit. Varying quantities of hazardous materials are manufactured, used, stored at an estimated 4.5 million facilities in the United States, from major industrial plants to local dry cleaning establishments and gardening supply store. We were the hub of chemical manufacturing in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then in the late 70s and early 80s, when the global economy opened up, a lot of these companies moved those manufacturing facilities overseas because the environmental laws and the regulations and the worker safety was a lot less enforced, if you will, in those other countries. And it was a lot cheaper for those companies to manufacture that stuff and then transport it over here. Well, we've seen a kind of resurgence in the last few years where a lot of that manufacturing is coming back to the country. So chemical emergency incidents can result from hazards as various power outages, tornadoes, or other extreme weather events and fires. Fortunately enough, there's a lot of planning that goes into those, and the higher the hazard, the higher the danger. A lot of those things are worked in to prevent that from happening. So the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act requires that detailed information about hazardous substance in your communities be available at the public's request. The law provides stiff penalties for companies that fail to comply and allows citizens to file lawsuits against companies and government agencies. Here in the state of Maryland, that program is administered through Maryland Department of the Environment using a system called MODERS. To me, as a first responder out there on the road, occasionally we'll go to that system and use it. Since September 11th, the security portion of that system has been locked down. If you don't use it every 31 days, you have to reset your pass device, and it's a little clunky, a little tough. But we have some workarounds that we've done in the state or in the county that help us, that are a whole lot better. So the federal statute, or EPCRA, that's the law that came out of that Bhopal, India release. requires that occupancies make 3 reports, one to the state CERC, which is in our case is Maryland Department of the Environment, one to the local LEPC, and one to the local fire department. If you manufacture, use, or transport hazardous materials or store it here in Howard County, over certain thresholds, there's legal limits. You have to report it to the government that you have it there. And we use that information for a myriad of different planning things. Do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right personal protective equipment or hazmat suits? Do we have the ability to respond to that spill if it happens? So in Howard County, when a occupant submits an online tier 2 report to the state, they forward that information to the local LEPC, and 2 of those requirements are taken care of. The HazMat permit program closes the gap that exists with reporting to the local fire department, and thus is an addition to the state reporting. One of the things that we did in the county is, according to the fire code, a lot of industries have changed their recipes or changed their ingredients for the products that they use to get them below the threshold, the reporting threshold, so they don't have to report how much chemicals that they have on site, because they don't have enough of it that they, and it could be, you can have up to 999 pounds of this chemical, but the minute you have 1,000 pounds, then you have to report it. So a lot of places say, okay, we will never have or store any more than 800 pounds of this stuff on our facility. So then it takes away the right or the need or the requirement for them to have to report the information to us. One of the things that we've done through the fire code is we have a hazmat permitting process in Howard County that says, nope, if it's on this list of chemicals, it doesn't matter if you have 8 ounces, 8 gallons, or 800 gallons of it, you have to report it to us. And when that happens, the fire marshal, we have the hazmat permitting guys in the fire marshal's office that go out, work with these folks. We build a pre-plan. We have a bunch of different site information that is available to me as a first responder right here on my cell phone. I have 3-factor authentication stuff that I have to go through to get to it, but it's there and we have it and it's at our fingertips. A lot better than the state system that is out there. So and when we talk to some of these fixed facilities, how this protects their property and how this protects them works out real well. So Howard County is home to 141 locations that report regular use and storage of considerable amounts of hazardous materials. 35 of those sites contain extremely hazardous substances as regulated by the EPA. Some of the sites are the county's 2nd, 5th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 15th largest major employers in the county. So think what would happen if we had an incident at one of those sites. The amount of people that would be out of a job, or the impact to the community, if you will. And if you go through and you read through some of those reports that I told you about earlier, it's real easy to figure out who these employers are in the county. And a lot of them are, most of them are really good stewards of the property that's entrusted to them here in the county. We are home to 2 licensed blasting operations that involve earth mining. We're home to at least 3 BSL-3 labs with several other BSLs at lower levels that support research and education. BSL is a biosafety lab. The county is currently centrally located between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. A nuclear blast, because the question always happens. If something happened in Baltimore or Washington, D.C., how will we feel it here in Howard County? We would definitely feel it because of our central location between the two. We're within 100 miles of both Calvert Cliffs Nuclear Power Plant in Calvert County and Peach Bottom Atomic Power Station in York County, Pennsylvania, and 110 miles from 3 Mile Island Nuclear Generation Station in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. So there are some, we would be caught up in a response, if you will, if something catastrophic ever happened at one of those nuclear power plants or facilities. So the Environmental Protection Agency has a EHS list. The Community Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act And the CERCLA Act, the Comprehensive Emergency Response Compensation and Liability Act, has a list of extremely hazardous chemicals, and they tell you, depending on how much of it is, you have to have what's the reported quantity that you have to report if you're storing it. And then if you have a leak or a release, they give you an amount that says if you have a release, even if you control it on your facility and it doesn't go anywhere, you still have to report it to the government. You still have to report that release to the government. Since September 11th, the Department of Homeland Security has tightened up on a lot of these places that use these things. And I get phone calls, I get not really subpoenas, but I get information that says, hey, how often do you interact with the folks at this address? And when it starts off like that, I know who it is. I know where it's coming from. So, oh yeah, we work with them on their emergency response plan. Have you ever been out to the site? Yes, we go out to the site twice a year. All of our HazMat facilities in the county that have EHS facilities, the HazMat guys tour it, and the local fire company go out and tour it, walk the property, understand what goes on there, and do site visits or building tours, if you will, there. And then, you know, what's the security like there? Did you have to check in? Did you have to sign in? And all that is that's a Homeland Security evaluation of, are these people doing what they say they do in their plan? And then every now and then one of their inspectors will show up at the gate or at the front door, knock on the door and say, hey, I want to come in, and I'm a neighbor. I want to come in and see what you have here. And they test them out to see that it's happening and things are going right the way they're supposed to. Hazardous permitting in Howard County, HazMat permitting. Again, we talked a little bit about this. The term hazardous materials is equivalent to hazardous substance or hazardous chemical. So you can call it whatever you want. If they call it that, you have to report to us. Type 1 permits are required for hazardous chemicals identified in the threshold planning quantity. Type 2 and 3 and 5 permits require extremely hazardous substances defined by 40 CFR Part 355. And again, a lot of these, some of these are, you know, gas stations. We have HazMat people that report to us. They have a generator out back, an emergency generator that has 3,000 gallons of diesel fuel in it. Well, that's anything over 55 gallons, you have to report it and so forth. So they're all over the place. So Type 5 permits are required for any substance in accordance with the section of the code that does not otherwise require 1, 2, 3, 4 permits. You still have to have it. So like I said, we have a pretty stringent requirement for reporting hazardous materials in the county. And we occasionally will go out and run a call for a fire alarm. And through the course of the investigation of the fire alarm, realize that, oh, what's going on here? What do you guys do here? Oh, we're a pharmaceutical research facility. Oh, got any hazardous materials here? Oh yeah, nothing that you guys have to worry about. Nothing over the reportable quantity or whatever. I'm like, oh, are you aware of the fire code in Howard County, Maryland says that you have to? Oh no, we didn't know that. Yeah. So where we get them caught up a lot of times is people will put in building permits to renovate a piece of property. And, you know, what's the property going to be used for? Oh, we're putting in research hoods and we're putting in this or this or whatever. It'll trigger our friends in DOPE to look at us and say, hey, it's a possibility that there's going to be some hazmat on this site. And when it goes through the permitting process, the fire marshal has to stamp off on it, and they make contact with them and say, hey, did you know? Well, where we run into problems every now and then is that people are doing this stuff and they're not filing for the permits to do the remodel of the building or whatever. So occasionally that happens, not as much as it used to. So this is an example of what's available to us right from my phone. There's a general site plan, a building floor plan, the hazardous materials inventory statement, which is just basically a spreadsheet that lists what the chemical is, how much they have on site, and where you can find it in the building. A copy of the contact with disposal cleanup company, because anytime people have hazardous materials in the county, we say, hey, do you have a cleanup contractor on standby that can respond and help you clean up? And they're like, oh no, well, it's in the fire code, in the hazmat permitting section, you have to have one. And occasionally our fire marshal guys will call that number and say, yeah, this is the fire marshal calling from Howard County, just calling it to see that you still have a contract with X number company or whatever. Yep, we still have one, and you know, on and on and on. So it's pretty neat little process that we have. So if something happens and you change, you get rid of something, 5% increase in the amount of any one type of hazard class, you have to report to us and let us know that the change has happened. And then notification 30 days prior to vacating the property. Our hazmat guys will go out and inspect the property to make sure that when people that we knew had hazardous materials stored in the county, that they don't close up shop and move out and leave that hazardous materials there for somebody else to clean up. So we look at hazardous materials within the county. We have several fixed facilities, transportation routes. There are two major pipelines that run through the county. We'll talk a little bit about them at like a 30,000 foot view. And then we have two major rail lines that run right adjacent to the county or right through the county that have hazmat being transported on them every day. So you look at fixed facilities in the county. This is a map that came right off of the Howard County website. We have not had a large hazardous materials release with mass fatalities, such as the one that that happened in Bhopal, India. However, numerous fixed sites, hazardous material incidents happen that require us to respond to them. We talk about them when we report out. Some of them require response by the local fire stations, and then others require our special operations team, or the hazmat team, if you will, to come out. They might result in evacuation in place, sheltering, or other protective measures. We'll talk a little bit about that, and what the impact on the public, the property, the facilities, and infrastructure. We also take into consideration the economic impact to the company and to the county. What's the impact on responders, the continuity of operations, and the continued delivery of service. And then, of course, you know, what impact on the environment. Is it persistent or biodegradable? This stuff gets released into the environment. Is it biodegradable? Does it go away, or is it persistent and it stays there forever? If it's something that stays there forever, we get the right people involved, and it has to be cleaned up to the point where, you know, people are digging up soil and taking contaminated soil away and then replacing it with fresh, clean soil. So we also think about the fixed facilities that we have in the county and what the confidence is of the citizens and the folks that live in the county. So if you take a look at this, the majority of our fixed facilities are basically on this side of Route 29. And then the largest majority of the highly hazardous stuff is right here along the I-95 corridor because of its close proximity to 95. You know, one of the biggest things that we have, you look at a lot of the purple stuff, anhydrous ammonia is one of the things that's on the list that's, you know, extremely hazardous. A lot of the manufacturing facilities up and down along this corridor here use anhydrous ammonia as a refrigerant. We have 3 of the largest refrigerated cold storage facilities in the country right here in Howard County. Giant Food has a warehouse, Nestle's or Dreyer's Ice Cream. And then there's another one not too far away from here, Merchants Terminal. A lot of refrigerated space up and down the boulevard, and that's all anhydrous ammonia. So that's where you see a lot of that stuff. So, but yep. So one of the things that you can look at when you go to a fixed facility, what's the level of security there? All of those places that I just mentioned to you, you can't park in their parking lot and walk right up to their front door of their building. They all have security in place where you have to be buzzed in, you know, screened before you go in. Some of the places have where you have to go in and watch a little training video and have to have an awareness of what's going on there. What's the hours of operation? A lot of these places operate around the clock. Truck traffic, how much truck traffic is going in and out, access to major transportation there, if you will. Large manufacturing or storage plants, truck terminals. We have a few of them up and down the county here, or this corridor, if you will. Service stations or gas stations, doctors' offices, hardware stores, dry cleaners, paint supply stores. There's quite a few of them there. We don't require it by law anymore after September 11th. But there are a lot of different places that still have it in the fire code. This is the NFPA diamond, if you will. And a lot of fixed facilities, you used to have to have that posted on your main front entrance that could be seen from the street, or any subsequent entrance that's used for loading or unloading, if you will. What they figured out after September 11th is it would be real easy for terrorists to drive up and down the street and look for these things. And the higher the number, the higher the risk, by the way. So it's reactivity, exposure to water, exposure to fire, and chemical lethality, if you will. The higher the number, the higher the risk. So if I was a terrorist, I could drive around and look for the ones that say 444. Oh, I'm going to blow something up. Let me go do it here. I'm going to crash a truck into a building. Let me do it here. Well, after September 11th, the NFPA standards started backing off, and a lot of the building codes said, don't know that that's a really good thing that we post that on the law or the regulation said it had to be big enough that we could see it from the street. So it's one of the things that changed. There still are some that you might drive by and you might see, ones that just the parent company has a policy that says we have to have this, so they have to have it. So transportation routes, all modes of transportation, highway, rail, air, marine, carry hazardous materials throughout our community on a regular basis. Think back to that list of all of those things that you have in your house. At some point in time in its life, before you took it off the shelf at Home Depot or at the grocery store, it was on one of these modes of transportation. I jokingly mentioned earlier that it's been a long time since a supply ship came up the Patapsco River. But a lot of the stuff that goes into the port does travel through the county on our transportation routes. Although not typically cargo itself, vehicle fuel is extremely flammable and often complicate those routine incidents. Every month when we talk about our HazMat spill release report, we talk about how many truck accidents that we are involved in. And when I talk about preventing fuel from getting into the environment, we get there, we'll put a plug in a tank, and then we have the capability to pump that fuel off the truck, put it in a tank, we take it back to the firehouse, put it in a tank, and either that responsible party can come get it, or Maryland Department of the Environment comes and gets it from us. But we don't dispose of it. We don't pay to get rid of it. It's up to the person who did it. But we prevent it from leaking it into the environment. So occasionally we'll get a trucking guy that says, that's $600 worth of diesel fuel that you're taking. I want it back. And I'm like, okay, come and get it. You can come get it, but it's got to leave our place in a certified container. Don't be bringing milk jugs to put your diesel fuel in. It's got to go into a certified container, and so on and so forth. And then I have to remind them that it's better than the alternative. What do you mean? Well, if we would have let it keep leaking, it would have leaked into the dirt on the side of the road, and you'd have been responsible for that $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 cleanup bill. And then they go, oh yeah, you know what? Just let Maryland Department of the Environment take care of that diesel fuel. We're not going to come get it. Never mind. So it happens quite frequently. So we often get called to addresses where fuel and indications don't otherwise involve hazardous cargo. We ran a call not too long ago in Elk Ridge. Somebody said there's home heating oil in the stream out behind our house, and we don't have home heating oil. What happened was somebody called 911 and said, we smell there's a gas odor in the neighborhood. And fire department goes out. Well, while they're en route, somebody calls them back, and the guy says, I think I found it. I think there's home heating oil in the creek that runs next to our house. So we show up, get into our mapping system and figure out where all the storm drains in the neighborhood that are connected that go to this stream. So we're out looking and looking. And of course, it hasn't rained in a couple of days. So it's like, where's this fuel coming from? We start working up the hill, and there's a definite demarcation of where there's oil and where there's no oil. So we put some tags in the storm drain. We said, supposed to get a little bit of rain tonight. We'll come back tomorrow morning and see, is this stuff getting washed down the hill? Where's it coming from? And we just followed it right back, followed it. There was a leak in a gentleman's home heating oil tank that was draining into his sump pump. And his sump pump, when it would fill up, the sump pump would kick on and it would pump the water out. And it went into a drain outside that went underground and went right into the storm drain out in front of the house. And he had no idea until we knocked on his door and said, do you have home heating oil here? Yes. Okay. Can we come take a look at your tank? We think you have a leak. Oh, no, I don't have a leak. And as soon as we stepped in the house, we were like, yes, you do. He had been in the house long enough with the leak that his nose was, nose blind to it. He didn't even smell it. He didn't know it. And we went down the basement. There was 2 inches of heating oil in his basement. He didn't even know. So, yeah. So EV fire and emergency considerations and concerns. It's a growing, electric vehicles. It's a growing concern. When the batteries catch on fire and it propagates to the next one and sets the next one on fire, you're talking about a fire that in most cases we can't put out. There are fire departments that have put 60 and 70,000 gallons of water on car fires and have still not put the car fire out. So we're still trying to work through that process of how to handle that and what we're going to do when it happens. There are a lot of fire departments that are talking about buying these sealed container things. They put them in and they submerge the car in water. Well, car manufacturers tell you don't do that. It's not a good thing because now you have all the chemicals from the batteries itself that are burning now you have this pool of contaminated water that once the car fire is out, now what do we do with this contaminated water? Currently in the state of Maryland, there is no contractor that will come and take that hazardous water and dispose of it. So we're still trying to work through that and figure out what that's going to look like. So pipelines, we have two major pipelines that run through the county. One of them is a liquid pipeline that has gasoline, diesel fuel, home heating oil, depending on what they're running through it. It all comes through the same pipeline. It's buried underground, and in most places you have no idea that it's there unless you live there. And when you put in a permit to have a built-in swimming pool put in the backyard, and they tell you, can't do that. There's a pipeline running through the back of your, back adjacent to your property. There is a major pipeline, the red one, that runs down, that comes from Dorsey Mill, which is right across the Carroll County line at the tank farm, that runs down and goes to BWI Airport. All the aviation fuel that's used at BWI Airport comes through a pipeline that goes through Howard County. That's why you never see gasoline delivery trucks pulling up to the airport to fill those big tanks, because they have their own pipeline that comes in and they fill the tanks up there as they need it. So natural gas pipelines, we have. That's the red one there, yeah. Yep. Aviation fuel, because it's a couple different grades, depending on what they need. They have a couple different, but yeah. So, and there's also other liquid stuff that they push through there. What you don't see here is that pipeline runs over to the airport, but it also runs along the rail line that is just across the county line also. So depending on where it's going, you get that. So natural gas, there's a pretty big natural gas pumping station here in the county, where up until about 7 or 8 years ago, the natural gas that was coming through, like Mobile, Alabama, coming from the Gulf Coast, came up the coast and it heated all the homes in northern New York and Canada through that pumping station or through that line. since all the fracking and stuff started up in Pennsylvania, they added on to the capability at that pumping station, and now they can sell the gas that's being mined in Pennsylvania and pump it back and sell it. They put it on boats and ship it out as an export. So we have pipelines that run both ways, not only just coming up, but going the other way also. Some of that natural gas has the odorant in it, and some of it doesn't. There's a place here in Howard County where Baltimore Gas and Electric buys gas off the pipeline that doesn't have the odorant in it, and then they put the odorant in it at that station. So if you drive out Route 32 past 108, you pay attention to the stuff on the right, you'll see it. Next time you go out that way, you'll see that station they do there. So the pipeline operators are really good. I don't want to say friends, but they're really good stewards to us. That's a transportation thing that is closely monitored and regulated by the Department of Transportation. We have a lot of interaction with them. On the natural gas side, we have a couple of different places out in the western end of the county where in the 40s and 50s, when they were running that pipeline through and they came into a farmer and said, hey, we want to dig up your farm field and put this pipeline through. Will you allow us to right of way? In order to do that, farmers were like, well, what do you mean? I grow crops on this land. Well, there's going to be a sliver 12 or 14 feet wide that you're not going to be able to grow crops on, but we'll compensate you for that. They write them land use agreements, and they put what are called farm taps in. So that farmer gets free natural gas to heat his house and his barn and all that stuff for the right to run, for them to run it through. So we have a couple of them in the county that we've had situations where, the regulator keeps popping and somebody calls and says, there's a green box in the field out next to my house that keeps making this funny noise and we don't know what it is. Look at it. So it's a farm box. Call the Colonial Pipeline and say, hey, you got a farm box loaded right here. And they go out and open it up, and yep, it's regulators, just popping in some work on it. But, yeah. So they do a lot of training with us. This is one of the this is the compressor station. That is actually almost geographically right in the middle of the county. If you were to dissect the county, this pipeline is like right in the middle of the county. A couple of good ways to tell where the pipelines are. They have to have these markers on them, and they say right on them, liquid petroleum pipeline, natural gas pipeline, and the regulation says I should be able to stand and look and see it from here and see the next one. Route 108 in front of Howard High School. There's a big pipeline that runs right up through. In fact, it pops up out of the ground right past Howard High School, and you can see it. But they're that's the pipelines are there. Never had a major event with either one of them, and there is two different places in the county where both of those pipelines cross each other. So, yep. So rail lines. We have two major rail lines. One of the oldest rail lines in the country actually runs through. Both of them are operated for us by CSX. The old main line subdivision runs from Relay, makes a right-hand turn and kind of runs up along the Patapsco River, goes up through Ellicott City, out through the western end of the county, and then out to Pointer Rocks in Frederick. The Washington branch, not too far from here, comes out of the city, runs down along our border here. CSX and the MARC train run on that right away. We have terminals, yards and sidings here in the county. CSX has a major car terminal in Jessup, not too far from here, where a lot of the roll-on and roll-off stock that comes into the port, they bring it out here on trains, spread the cars out of the yard, and then load them up on car carriers or reconfigure trains, if you will, to ship the cars across the country to get them where they need to go. And that is down off of Dorsey Run Road. So this is an example of some of the preparedness stuff that we do. That's our railroad access guide. A few folks on our special operations team walked on foot every mile of rail line in the county. And at every one of those mile posts, just like they have on the highway, the railroad has mile markers along the railroad. We have a documented, if something happens and CSX calls and says there's a train derailment at milepost number 7 on the old main line, we know, can we drive a pickup truck there? Where's the closest access? Do we need an ATV? We have a pretty good idea of where to get there and how to get it and what access problems that we're going to have there. So we have it's one of our things that we use to make that happen. So CSX transportation, I tell people all the time, and after the incident that happened in East Palestine last year with the rail, I learned a long time ago doing HazMat here in the county that trains bring a lot of really bad stuff through our community, but they do it safely every day. While you're asleep at night, trains are running by and there's a lot of nasty stuff on there. The other thing that the railroads do is when they have an accident, it's usually pretty big accident, but they bring a big checkbook with them and they clean up their mess. The 5 or 6 train derailments that I've worked with CSX on in the county that involved hazardous materials, they have a team of people, they have contractors, and believe me, for every hour that rail line is shut down, it's costing them money, because a train that would normally run out of the Port of Baltimore has to take a 7-day detour to get around to go if it can't come through Baltimore, it can't come through Howard County. So when something happens on those rail lines, they want to get that stuff cleaned up and out of there as quick as they can. We ran a HazMat incident involving a train derailment on one of the CSX lines, and that train track straddles both sides of the Patapsco River. The river does this, and the train track runs straight through it. We had chlorine and ammonia cars turned upside down in the Patapsco River. No leaks, no spills. I worked that incident from about 1:30 in the morning to about 7:30. I had come home the night before to go watch my daughter in the Christmas pageant at school. I was taking a HazMat class at the National Fire Academy up in Emmitsburg. And my wife said, "You driving back tonight?" I'm like, "No, I'll get up early in the morning. I'll go early in the morning." Well, pager went off at 1 o'clock in the morning for a train derailment. She's like, "You can't go. You got to go back to school in the morning." I'm like, this is what I'm learning in class. I got to go. So I left there at 7:30. I went back to Emmitsburg. When I left and came up Marriottsville Road to get on Route 70, there were lines of tractor trailers that had equipment on them and had sections of new railroad track stacked on them. I left and went back to the National Fire Academy, did a little brief out for the class. I had called the instructor, told him, he said, "We're watching it on CNN. I want a full report when you get here." So I gave him an idea what was going on, what was happening. Left there at 4 o'clock at the end of the day. It was on a Friday. Class was over with. Coming back down the road, my boss calls me and says, "Hey, my son's graduating from the police academy. We're almost done cleaning up this mess. Can you come and relieve me so I can go to his graduation tonight?" I said, "Sure." I go back, and sure enough, they brought cranes in, they put new train track in, and they picked up the cars out of the river, put them back on new wheel sets, and pushed them down the track to get them out of the way. I walked into the command post. He explained to me what's going on. I walked into the command post, and CSX had HazMat folks set up. And I'm looking and I'm like, this map right here that you have with these red dots, the guy says, we set monitoring stations up all through the valley. Within about 1.5 miles of where the train derailment happened, they set up air monitoring stations in the valley, and we're watching them. I said, "Well, what's up with this yellow circle on this one?" And they said, "That's the only person in the valley that refused to evacuate. She wanted the shelter in place." And I'm like, okay. And he says, "And we're doing our best to make sure that nothing gets out or whatever. And when we get done, we're going to show her, here's the readings for the air monitoring that was placed on your front porch to make sure that you didn't get exposed." So they make a big mess, but they clean it up. So, and when you look at CSX by the number, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. Not sure if you guys know about the Howard Street tunnel that runs through Baltimore. Made a lot of news a few years back. They had a fire in it. The current administration in the White House just gave CSX a lot of money to go in and remodel that tunnel. The problem is right now, single stack trains like this can go through that tunnel without a problem. Well, one of the things that the railroad industry figured out was instead of using box cars, if we use these sea containers that we pick up with a crane and put on a truck, we can stack them two on top of each other. And a train that's the normal size, if we put two locomotives in the front and two locomotives in the back, that same size train can double the amount of cargo that it pushes across the country if we can double stack them. Well, the problem is in the heart of CSX's territory, which is the Howard Street Tunnel, they can only fit single stacks through there. So they're going through and lowering the tunnel to be able to run double stacks through there. If you live in Howard County, you might remember a few years back, CSX was looking to buy up some of the property along that rail line down here to be able to put yards in where they could bring a double stack train up, take the cars off of it, push the train through the tunnel, reload it, push it through again, and then restack it on the other side and then send it off. Because remember, how long does it take to get around Baltimore? 7 days, where we could unload that train, move it through and all that. But now they got the money and they're lowering the tunnel, so it won't be long. Anybody know where this is at? That's the Thomas Viaduct in Elkridge, yeah. Yep. So not only is it an arched bridge, but it has a curve in it too. One of only two in the country that do that. So for any of our rail fans. So sidings are often used for car storage. Anywhere you look where there's double tracking, all the red lines right there. That's where we have sidings. And a lot of times what will happen is they'll come and pick up a rail car. Home Depot gets lumber delivered on a train. They might drop that lumber car off and leave it sit on a siding for a while until they can get another train in to move it out of the way. There's a plant in Savage that gets cement, that gets dry bulk cement in a train. And they push it off on one of those sidings and it stays there. So there are several tunnels in Howard County. And again, the one in Woodbine's 385 feet long. Some of these tunnels you can look through and you can see the white light at the other end. I talked to the guys that walked it and did the measuring and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how do you know that the white light at the other end is not, that is the other end of the tunnel and it's not a train coming? Like, oh, we coordinated that on it. Okay. But some of them are so long and they have bends in them that you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we have a pretty good pre-plan. This is another train derailment that we ran. This is one that happened in the state park. Safety and response, stay off the tracks. The tracks are a privately owned right of way. So if you are on the tracks, you are technically trespassing. I cringe when I see these, families taking beautiful pictures in the fall with the kids on the train tracks and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, so we have what we call a risk-based response process. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the available resources that CSX brings. But it's amazing how, they just pick these things back up. And those tanks are designed to take that kind of punishment, if you will. So here's one of the other things that we do with CSX every couple of years. We petition them to give us a list of all the stuff that's running through the rails in Howard County. One of the biggest things in East Palestine was that they said, we didn't know that there was hazardous material being transported through our community. I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. Well, then somebody that works for you in emergency management or somebody who works for you in the fire department wasn't doing their job. Because all you have to do is ask the railroad and they'll tell you. They will tell you what's moving through your community. So, and actually this is 2 pages out of a document that's about, I think the last one that we got from them a year and a half ago was like 79 pages of material that's running through the county. So, and we take that and we look at it and we go through and say, how much of this stuff is really, really hazardous? How much of it percentage wise is coming through the county? Do we have the monitoring and detection equipment? Do we have the personal protective equipment to protect our people if something like that happens? So, and the railroads have been really good to us. They've provided us with training. In fact, there's a school in Pueblo, Colorado that we can go to, and the railroads pay for it. It's all expense paid trip. You go out and learn everything you want to know about trains and handling hazardous materials. So minimizing personal and community exposure, reporting hazardous materials incidents. If you witness a hazardous materials incident, a spill or leak, or even if one you think is, call 911. I think it was back in July or August in my report. I had a follow-up that I had to go out and help one of our residents that had called the National EPA response line for hazardous materials releases and reported that a trash truck came up the street and something broke on the trash truck, and there was some kind of oil all over the gutters, the downspout, and all, or the house in the front lawn of this place. Well, I go out there the next day, and sure enough, it's quite a mess. And I asked the gentleman, I said, "Sir, why didn't you just call 911?" He says, "Oh, it's just an oil spill. It's not really." I said, "Well," so we worked with the contractor, got a hold of our folks in environmental services because the county contracts with those people to haul the trash, and they're responsible for cleaning it up. So we called the guy, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, we had a truck blew a hydraulic line. Our mechanics came out and fixed it." And they're like, "What about cleaning up the mess?" And he's like, "What about the mess?" Well, the truck broke down at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 7:30, 8 o'clock at night before the mechanic got there. He fixed the truck, and he didn't notice the spill. It's kind of how he said it. So, and within about an hour, they had a cleanup contractor out there taking care of it and all that. And my response to the gentleman was, if you'd have called 911 last night, this would have been cleaned up by this morning. It would have been done. So, yeah. Be prepared to provide as much of the following information as possible. What's involved, if you know. Are there any placards or labels? What's the precise location of the incident? We, believe it or not, we get dispatched on calls all the time where somebody will say, "I think I'm on I-95, but I'm not really sure." And our 911 dispatcher will say, "Are you northbound or are you southbound?" And people will say, "I don't know what that means." And they're like, "Are you leaving Baltimore going to Washington, D.C., or are you coming from D.C. going to Baltimore?" Oh, yeah. I left Laurel and I'm driving to Baltimore. Okay, that means you're going north. So believe it or not, that happens where a lot of people have no idea where they're at. So the size of the incident in qualitative terms, is it a really big truck or a small truck? Is there a plume? And if so, which way is it moving? And I laugh because I tell people we expect somebody to tell us which way it's moving when they don't even know which direction they were going. So, what's the color of the smoke or of the spilled liquid? I can tell you that if it's smoke coming off of it and it's any other color than gray, it's not good. Greens and blues and reds, not really good unless you're watching something in a movie. If it's involving hazardous materials and the color of the smoke is other than gray or like the brownish looking, it's not good. So the altitude of the movement of the plume, is it rising up and going away, or is it laying low down to the ground? Anybody see just on the news the other day, they had a propane leak, a major propane leak in Tokyo, and there were people driving down the street, driving through it because they thought it was fog. They're driving through a 2-foot plume in the street of propane that eventually goes woof, and woof is not good, no matter where you're at. So yeah, it's another one of those things that you can Google. If there's anyone injured, how many people are injured? For a transportation incident, a description of the vehicle, it's a tanker or a pickup truck. We had, we laugh, kind of joke with folks all the time. Is the truck driver still there, or is he running up the side of the road? If the truck driver had an accident, he's running up the side of the road, should probably follow him because he knows what's in the truck. And if he's running, it's probably not a good thing. So protecting yourself if it happens in your community, emergency service personnel will notify you of the steps to take. The days of mass evacuations and moving people out of the way, they just don't happen a whole lot anymore. We found out that a lot of the information that we have, we have plume modeling now that we can plug in. We get real-time weather reports that we put that information in there. And, for the worst case scenario of this leak or this release, it's only going to affect these folks right here. If that happens, normally we do, public warning and notification, whether it be, the NOAA weather radios, we can put information out on those. The information network, the local warning sirens, a lot of places that we have, some of these places have horns or sirens that go off when there's an incident. Anybody that lives or works in direct proximity to those have a pretty good idea what it is, because folks will go, hey, every Saturday when that alarm goes off, what does that mean? Oh, we're testing our chemical release alarm. What do you mean? So what to do, that kind of stuff. So emergency broadcast systems. There is a couple of different things, that some technologies out there that we use where we can reach out to folks. We can drop, our 911 center can drop a pin on a map and put a circle around it and say, call every landline in that circle and tell people to, stay inside, close the windows, turn off the air conditioning. The problem with that is there's a lot of people now that are getting rid of landlines and they're going to cell phones. Well, we can reach out to the cell carriers and say, hey, we're having a thing. You guys, if you're one of those people that gets, missing children alerts on your phone, if we have a chemical reaction or we have a chemical release, we can access that same system and send out those same kind of alerts. I say we, but our friends in emergency management will help us out with that. But that's some of the other stuff that happens. And of course, there's always, social media and television and so forth that says, hey, there's an incident going on. Fire department's advising sheltering in place. Most of the time, if it's a situation like that, we're sending people down your driveway or we're sending people down the street, knocking on doors, tracking how many people are here, who lives here, is the house vacant, is it open, who's staying, are you leaving, are you going? We've had a couple of incidents where people are like, I'm not staying here, I'm leaving. Okay, what's your name, what's your phone number, and where are you going? What do you mean, where am I going? Well, so like in 3 hours, when somebody says, my neighbor, I don't know where my neighbor is, we can look at and say, your neighbor's okay, your neighbor's fine. Do you have your neighbor's phone number? Yeah, I know how to get a hold. Okay, that's fine. Then call them and they're good to go. But we try to track that kind of stuff, because then occasionally we'll get somebody that'll come home and say, now, what do you mean I can't get into my community? Well, there's been an incident and we're cleaning it up now and it'll be over with here before long. Well, where's my husband at? My husband, well, where do you live at, ma'am? Okay, well, your husband left and he said he was going over to Jean's house. I don't know who that is, but that's what he told us. But why isn't he answering his phone? I don't know. We'll come to find out the husband left and forgot to take his phone with him. Left at home, left his phone home. And when he left and he went to come back into the neighborhood, the police were like, yeah, right, buddy. You're not going back in. You can't go back in. So, but it's happened. So if you've been alerted of a hazardous materials incident, you should wait further information from emergency response personnel. Upon receiving this information, follow it carefully. Your primary objective is to keep your distance from the incident in order to minimize your chances of contamination. If we say, hey, we need you to evacuate, it's for your safety. We want you to evacuate or get out of that area. Don't come into the area. But if we say, hey, shelter in place, and we take that information, if you decide later on, hey, I'm going to leave, then you should call us and tell us and let us know that. And we would kind of walk through that, if you will. So protecting our community from the consequences of hazardous materials accidents requires teamwork. It doesn't happen automatically. Like I said, we work across the board with all of our partners in county government. When a major hazardous materials incident were to happen in the county, it's not just going to be the fire department and the police department. The health department gets involved, emergency management gets involved, the sheriff's department. I mean, it's a environmental services, everybody gets in it. We're pretty fortunate here because of where we are, that we have additional expertise through state, federal, local and other local agencies, local citizens. Most of the time, local citizens can't do a whole lot to help us out with it. Rather than trying to volunteer to assist, be aware that the public information system, pay attention to it, and like I said, take care of it and do as we ask, if you will. So the responding agencies will have access to information about the chemical, its behavior, weather conditions. And again, there used to be a time of day where we would show up with the HazMat unit and we would set up a weather station and then bring it in, and we take the information and we put it in. We have computer modeling software right now that will reach out to any one of the 25 or 30 known weather stations in the county and download information like that. Because we've had situations in the past where somebody says, oh, it's not good, it's not too bad here. Yeah, but if you look at the weather stations all around us, there's a storm coming in, and the storm's not here yet, but it's coming, and you have to, we have that information, we have the data, we can do that pretty quickly now. Where before it was a little tough. So, any closing remarks, questions, comments? So there's hazardous materials in our community. We live with it every day. In fact, I was chatting with the folks that were here earlier. It's pretty comical, but it's still pretty true. If you go onto YouTube and Google Better Living Through Chemistry, there's an old informational video. It's about 7 or 8 minutes long that was put out by the Chemical Safety Board like in the 60s. And it goes through the house and talks about all the different chemicals that are in the house that you can find in the house and all the stuff that it's made of. It's pretty comical. So Better Living Through Chemistry. So any other questions, comments? Anybody online? Any hands up? No? They all probably went to sleep or signed off, kind of. So. And I think these slides are going to be available. I try not to get a lot of these folks that report this information to us. We try not to put as much of it out there. When I first got in the fire department, we used to carry 3-ring binders in the front of fire apparatus that had pages and pages and pages of information of all these sites in the county. And then when September 11th happened, somebody went, we should probably keep that information under lock and key. And then we went out and took them off of all of our fire apparatus and locked them up in strategic places and updated them. And now, of course, now everything's online, so it's a lot easier now. But yeah, so in order for us to go in and get the trust of the public to say, hey, give us this information, share with us what it is that you're doing here. There's some federal government facilities that are here in the county that are doing some pretty neat stuff. There's some federal facilities in this county that we don't know what they do there. Because it's on a need to know basis and we don't need to know. So, but anyway, yep. So.
Great. Thank you.
There aren't a whole lot of things that keep me up at night. We live here. So.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining online and attending here in person. I'd like to draw your attention one more time to our QR code. This will take you to our mailing list so you can get all of your updates for these meetings and any other Office of Emergency Management events. But other than that, that is all that we have for y'all today. Please stay safe, stay nice and warm. Please, if you have to drive, be careful out there tomorrow. And we will see everyone next time. Thank you.
We had one in